12-year-old Maya stepped out of her father's car, clutching the strap of her backpack tightly. Her heart raced as she looked up at the grand building before her. It was her first day at St. Catherine's Academy, one of the most prestigious private schools in town. The red brick walls and towering windows seemed both impressive and intimidating. Maya had always been a bright student, but this school felt different. Bigger, stricter, and full of unfamiliar faces. Her father, Mr. Thompson, leaned over to give her an encouraging smile. "You'll do great, Maya," he said softly, his voice warm with pride. "Just be yourself. Remember, you belong here." Maya nodded, though deep down she wasn't so sure. Being the new kid was never easy, especially when you stood out for reasons beyond your control. With her dark brown skin, curly hair tied neatly into braids, and a quiet demeanor, Maya knew she would attract attention in a school where most students didn't look like her. As they walked toward the entrance, Maya couldn't help but notice how polished everything seemed. The gleaming floors, the perfectly pressed uniforms of other students, and the stern expressions on teachers' faces. This place was nothing like her old school. She tried to push away the nervous flutter in her stomach as her father handed her off to the principal's assistant, who guided her to her homeroom class. When Maya entered the classroom, all eyes turned to her. Some students whispered behind their hands while others simply stared. A tall woman with sharp features and tightly pinned back blonde hair stood at the front of the room. This was Mrs. Dawson, her homeroom teacher. Without missing a beat, Mrs. Dawson glanced at Maya briefly, before gesturing toward an empty seat near the back of the room. "Take your seat quickly, please," she said curtly, barely acknowledging Maya's presence. Maya hurried to her desk, feeling small under the weight of curious stares. As the lesson began, she focused hard on following along, determined to prove that she belonged there. But something about Mrs. Dawson made her uneasy. The teacher's tone was clipped, and her gaze lingered longer than necessary on certain students, including Maya, when they raised their hands or answered questions. During a group activity, Maya found herself paired with two girls who barely spoke to her. They exchanged quick glances and hushed giggles whenever Maya offered an idea. At first, she thought it might just be because she was new, but their dismissive attitudes stung more than she cared to admit. Still, Maya kept her head high, refusing to let anyone see her discomfort. At lunchtime, Maya sat alone at a corner table, picking at her sandwich. She watched other students laughing and chatting freely, wishing she could join them. Just then, a friendly-looking boy named Ethan approached her. "Hey, I'm Ethan," he said with a shy smile. "Mind if I sit here?" Maya hesitated but nodded. For the first time that day, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe not everyone at this school would make her feel invisible. Little did Maya know her journey at St. Catherine's Academy was only beginning. What she didn't realize yet was that the challenges ahead weren't just about fitting in. They were about standing up for herself, even when it meant facing people who underestimated her. And unbeknownst to Mrs. Dawson, the quiet girl in the back row had a connection to the school that no one expected. This sets the stage for the story, introducing Maya's character, her insecurities, and hinting at the conflict to come. It also establishes the setting and some key relationships without rushing into the main drama. The next few days at St. Catherine's Academy were a mix of small victories and growing unease for Maya. While she managed to keep up with her schoolwork, and even impressed some of her classmates during group projects, Mrs. Dawson's behavior toward her became increasingly noticeable. At first it was subtle, things like ignoring Maya's raised hand in class or giving her papers back without offering feedback. But soon, the teacher's actions grew bolder, leaving Maya confused and hurt. One morning during math class, Mrs. Dawson handed out graded quizzes. When she reached Maya's desk, she dropped the paper onto it with an audible sigh. "I expected better from someone who claims to care about their education," she said loudly enough for the entire class to hear. Maya blinked, stunned. She had scored an 87%, one of the highest grades in the class, yet Mrs. Dawson's tone made it sound like a failure. A few students snickered, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Maya tried to brush it off, telling herself that maybe Mrs. Dawson was just having a bad day, but the pattern continued. During history class later that week, Maya eagerly volunteered to read aloud from the textbook. As soon as she began, Mrs. Dawson interrupted her. "Let's let someone else try," she said sharply, cutting Maya off mid-sentence. Another student took over, stumbling over words but receiving no correction from the teacher. Maya sank lower in her seat, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. By Friday, Maya couldn't ignore the tension anymore. On her way home from school, she confided in her father about what was happening. Sitting across from him at the kitchen table, she hesitated before speaking. "Dad, do you think I'm not good enough for this school?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling. Mr. Thompson frowned, setting down his coffee mug. "What makes you say that, sweetheart?" Maya recounted the incidents with Mrs. Dawson, her words spilling out faster as she spoke. "She never picks me when I raise my hand, and she always finds something wrong with my work, even when I know I did well. And today, she wouldn't even let me finish reading in class." Her father listened intently, his expression unreadable. When Maya finished, he placed a reassuring hand over hers. "You are more than good enough, Maya. Don't ever doubt that. Sometimes people judge others unfairly because they can't see past their own biases. That doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It means they need to do better." Though his words comforted her, Maya still felt uneasy. She wanted to believe her father, but the sting of Mrs. Dawson's treatment lingered. Over the weekend, she spent hours poring over her assignments, determined to prove her worth, not just to Mrs. Dawson, but to herself. On Monday morning, Maya walked into homeroom with renewed determination. However, things only worsened. During a discussion about cultural diversity in literature, Mrs. Dawson singled her out again. "Maya, since you seem so interested in these topics, why don't you tell us what your kind thinks about representation in books?" she asked with a faint smirk. The room fell silent. Maya froze, unsure how to respond. Her classmates exchanged awkward glances, some looking sympathetic, others uncomfortable. Ethan, who had started sitting near her regularly, shot Mrs. Dawson a disapproving look but said nothing. Maya swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay calm. "I think everyone deserves to see themselves represented fairly in stories," she replied, evenly, meeting Mrs. Dawson's gaze despite the knot forming in her stomach. "It helps us understand each other better." Mrs. Dawson raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Interesting perspective," she muttered before moving on to another topic. Maya exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of her desk beneath the table. She knew then that this wasn't going to stop anytime soon. That evening, as Maya sat in her room staring at her reflection in the mirror, she wondered how long she could endure this treatment. She didn't want to burden her father further, but keeping quiet felt unbearable too. What she didn't realize yet was that her strength and resilience would soon be tested in ways she couldn't imagine, and that help might come from unexpected places. This part deepens the conflict between Maya and Mrs. Dawson, highlighting the emotional toll of the teacher's prejudice. It also reinforces Maya's determination to rise above the situation, setting the stage for future developments. The tension in Maya's life continued to build as Mrs. Dawson's behavior became more blatant. Each day felt like walking through a minefield, never knowing when or how the teacher would strike next. But amidst the challenges, Maya began noticing small moments of kindness from unexpected corners. Reminders that not everyone at St. Catherine's Academy shared Mrs. Dawson's views. One afternoon during art class, Maya found herself paired with Ethan for a collaborative project. They were tasked with creating a mural inspired by themes of unity and diversity. While sketching out ideas on paper, Ethan glanced at her hesitantly before speaking. "Hey, I've noticed some stuff going on with Mrs. Dawson," he said, quietly, keeping his voice low so no one else could hear. "She's been pretty harsh toward you lately." Maya stiffened, caught off guard by his observation. She hadn't realized anyone else had picked up on it, or cared enough to say something. "It's nothing," she mumbled, trying to brush it off. "I'm probably just overthinking things." Ethan shook his head firmly. "No, you're not. I see it too. It's wrong, Maya. You deserve better than that." His words surprised her, not just because he'd spoken up, but because they came from genuine concern. For the first time since starting at the school, Maya felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she wasn't completely alone after all. Their conversation marked the beginning of a tentative friendship. Over the next few days, Ethan made an effort to sit near Maya during lunch and check in with her between classes. He even suggested they study together for an upcoming science test, inviting another classmate named Sophie to join them. Sophie, who had initially seemed indifferent to Maya, turned out to be surprisingly kind and supportive once they started talking. As the trio spent more time together, Maya began opening up about her struggles. Not everything, but enough to let them understand why she often seemed withdrawn. To her relief, neither Ethan nor Sophie dismissed her feelings. Instead, they encouraged her to stand her ground. "You're smart and talented, Maya," Sophie told her one afternoon while working on their study notes. "Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." Despite their support, Maya still struggled to confront Mrs. Dawson directly. The thought of standing up to someone in authority terrified her, especially since she didn't want to risk making things worse. But fate intervened in an unexpected way. During English class later that week, Mrs. Dawson assigned an essay topic. "What does leadership mean to you?" As Maya worked on her draft, she poured her heart into the assignment, drawing inspiration from her father's values and her own experiences. When the essays were handed back, Maya was shocked to find hers marked with glaring red corrections and a grade far lower than she expected. "This lacks depth," Mrs. Dawson wrote in bold letters at the top of the page. "Leadership requires strength, not sentimentality." Furious and hurt, Maya debated whether to approach the teacher after class. Before she could decide, Ethan leaned over and whispered, "That's ridiculous. Your essay was amazing. I read part of it when we studied together. Don't let her get away with this." For the first time, Maya considered taking action. With Ethan and Sophie's encouragement, she decided to take the issue to someone higher up. But who? The principal? No, that seemed too intimidating. Then it hit her. Mr. Carter, the vice principal, known for being approachable and fair-minded. The following morning, Maya nervously knocked on Mr. Carter's office door. When he greeted her warmly, she hesitated for a moment before explaining her concerns. She described Mrs. Dawson's treatment without naming names, focusing instead on the impact it had on her learning experience. Mr. Carter listened attentively, nodding thoughtfully as she spoke. "I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, Maya," he said kindly when she finished. "Let me look into it and see what can be done." Walking out of the office, Maya felt a mix of relief and anxiety. She knew speaking up was the right thing to do, but she couldn't shake the fear of retaliation. Little did she know, her decision to seek help would set off a chain of events that would change everything. For her, for Mrs. Dawson, and for the entire school community. This part highlights Maya finding allies in Ethan and Sophie, giving her emotional support and empowering her to take steps toward addressing the injustice. It also introduces a turning point where Maya begins standing up for herself, setting the stage for further developments in the story. The days following Maya's meeting with Mr. Carter were filled with nervous anticipation. She couldn't stop, replaying their conversation in her mind, wondering if she had done the right thing. Would he take her concerns seriously? Or would Mrs. Dawson find out and make things even worse? Despite her worries, Ethan and Sophie continued to reassure her. "You stood up for yourself," Sophie said during lunch one day. "That's something to be proud of." But pride wasn't enough to calm Maya's racing thoughts. Every time Mrs. Dawson glanced her way, Maya braced herself for some kind of backlash. Surprisingly, though, nothing changed, at least not immediately. The teacher seemed as dismissive as ever, but there was no sign that she knew about Maya's complaint. Then, one Friday afternoon, an announcement came over the intercom calling all students to the auditorium for a special assembly. As Maya filed into the large room alongside her classmates, she noticed a palpable buzz of curiosity in the air. No one seemed to know why they'd been summoned, including Maya herself. When everyone was seated, Principal Thompson stepped onto the stage. Maya froze, her heart skipping a beat. Her father rarely made appearances at school assemblies unless it was something important. Seeing him standing there, dressed in his usual crisp suit, sent a wave of panic through her. Had he found out about her meeting with Mr. Carter? Was this about her? "Good afternoon, students," her father began, his deep voice carrying across the silent auditorium. "Today, I want to talk to you about fairness, respect, and accountability. Values we hold. Dear at St. Catherine's Academy." Maya sank lower in her seat, trying to avoid drawing attention to herself. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Mrs. Dawson sitting among the other teachers near the front of the stage. The woman looked calm, almost smug, as if she had no idea what was coming next. "As many of you know," Principal Thompson continued, "our mission is to create an environment where every student feels valued and supported. Unfortunately, recent events have shown us that we still have work to do." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "We've received reports of behavior by certain members of our staff that goes against these principles. Such actions are unacceptable and will not be tolerated." A murmur rippled through the crowd of students. Some craned their necks to look at the teachers seated on stage, while others whispered furiously to their friends. Maya felt her cheeks burning. She hadn't expected her father to address the issue publicly, or so soon. Principal Thompson went on to explain that investigations were underway and assured the students that appropriate measures would be taken to ensure a safe and respectful learning environment. While he didn't name names, it was clear from the uncomfortable shifting of Mrs. Dawson in her seat that she understood exactly who he was referring to. After the assembly ended, Maya hurried out of the auditorium, desperate to escape the weight of what had just happened. But as she reached the hallway, her father called out to her. "Maya, wait!" She turned reluctantly, unsure of what to say. "Dad, I'm sorry," she stammered. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just wanted someone to listen." Her father smiled gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing, Maya. I'm proud of you for speaking up. You reminded me how important it is to lead by example, even when it's hard." Though relieved, Maya couldn't shake the guilt gnawing at her. She had exposed Mrs. Dawson's behavior, but now she worried about the consequences, not just for the teacher, but for herself. Word would spread quickly around the school, and she dreaded becoming the center of gossip. Later that evening, as Maya sat alone in her room, she realized something important. Standing up for herself wasn't just about seeking justice. It was about reclaiming her voice. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things could change, for her and for others like her. This part reveals the fallout of Maya's decision to speak up, showing her father stepping in to address the issue publicly. It highlights Maya's internal conflict and growth while setting the stage for further developments in the story. The days following the assembly were unlike anything Maya had ever experienced. Whispers filled the hallways and curious glances followed her wherever she went. Some students looked at her with admiration, while others seemed skeptical or even resentful. Maya tried to keep her head down, focusing on her schoolwork and spending time with Ethan and Sophie, who remained steadfastly by her side. Mrs. Dawson, however, was a different story. Since the assembly, the teacher had become eerily quiet in class, avoiding eye contact with Maya altogether. Gone were the cutting remarks and dismissive gestures, replaced by an uncomfortable silence that hung heavy in the air. While Maya appreciated the reprieve, it only added to her unease. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the calm before another storm. One afternoon, as Maya walked to her locker after class, she overheard two older students talking nearby. "Did you hear? Mrs. Dawson might get fired," one of them said excitedly. The other frowned. "Yeah, but isn't that kind of harsh? I mean, she's been here forever." Maya froze, gripping the strap of her backpack tightly. She hadn't considered the possibility of Mrs. Dawson losing her job. While the thought brought some relief, it also left her conflicted. Was exposing the truth worth ruining someone's career? Deep down, she knew Mrs. Dawson's actions were wrong, but did they justify such a drastic consequence? That evening, Maya sat at the dinner table with her father, picking at her food absent-mindedly. Sensing her mood, Mr. Thompson set his fork down and leaned forward. "Something on your mind, Maya?" She hesitated before speaking. "Dad, what happens to Mrs. Dawson now? Is she really going to lose her job because of me?" Her father sighed, choosing his words carefully. "It's not about you, sweetheart. It's about holding people accountable for their actions. If someone creates a hostile environment for others, they need to face the consequences. That's how we make sure everyone feels safe and respected. But what if she changes?" Maya asked softly. "What if she learns from this and becomes better?" Her father smiled faintly. "People can change, yes, but only if they're willing to acknowledge their mistakes and work to improve. Right now, it's up to Mrs. Dawson to decide what kind of person she wants to be." Though his explanation helped ease her guilt somewhat, Maya still felt torn. The situation weighed heavily on her, especially when rumors began swirling around the school. Some students praised her bravery, calling her a hero, while others accused her of exaggerating or seeking attention. Even Ethan and Sophie noticed how drained she seemed. "You don't have to carry all of this alone," Sophie reminded her during lunch one day. "You stood up for yourself, that's all anyone can ask of you." Ethan nodded in agreement. "Yeah, and no matter what anyone says, you're doing the right thing. Don't let the haters get to you." Their support meant the world to Maya, but it wasn't enough to shield her from the emotional toll of the situation. One particularly tough day, she found herself sitting alone in the library during free period, staring blankly at her textbook. A shadow fell across the page, and she looked up to see Mr. Carter standing there. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, kindly, gesturing to the chair across from her. Maya shook her head, and he sat down. After a moment of silence, he spoke. "I know this has been hard for you, Maya, but I want you to know. You've started something important here. People are talking, thinking, reflecting. Change doesn't happen overnight, but you've planted the seed." His words stayed with her long after he left. For the first time, Maya realized that her actions weren't just about confronting Mrs. Dawson. They were about sparking a larger conversation. Maybe she couldn't control the outcome, but she could take pride in knowing she'd stood up for what was right. As she packed up her things to leave the library, Maya caught sight of herself in a nearby window. For the first time in weeks, she didn't see fear or doubt in her reflection. Instead, she saw strength, a quiet determination that told her she could handle whatever came next. This part explores Maya's internal struggle as she grapples with the fallout of her decision. It highlights her growth and resilience while emphasizing the broader impact of her actions on the school community. The weeks that followed brought significant changes to St. Catherine's Academy, and Maya found herself at the center of a shifting tide. Mrs. Dawson had been temporarily suspended pending an official investigation, leaving the homeroom class without its usual teacher. In her place, a substitute named Ms. Patel, a warm and approachable woman with a knack for making students feel valued, stepped in. Her presence brought a breath of fresh air to the classroom, and for the first time, Maya felt like she could truly focus on her studies without constantly looking over her shoulder. Despite these improvements, the atmosphere in the school remained tense. Some students openly supported Maya, praising her courage during discussions about fairness and respect. Others, however, resented the disruption caused by the controversy, blaming her for ruining things. Maya tried to ignore the negative comments, but they still stung, especially when they came from unexpected places. One afternoon, as Maya walked through the courtyard after school, she was confronted by Jessica, one of the popular girls in her grade. Jessica crossed her arms and glared at Maya. "You know you didn't have to go running to the principal," she said sharply. "Mrs. Dawson wasn't that bad." Maya blinked, caught off guard. "She made me feel like I didn't belong here," she replied quietly but firmly. "If I hadn't said anything, nothing would have changed." Jessica rolled her eyes. "Well, now everyone's talking about it. You're making this whole school look bad." Before Maya could respond, Ethan appeared beside her, his expression stern. "Leave her alone, Jess," he said firmly. "Maya did what she had to do. If you don't get that, Maybe you're part of the problem too. Jessica huffed and stormed off, leaving Maya standing there, shaken but grateful for Ethan's support. He turned to her with a reassuring smile. Don't let people like her get to you. They're just scared of change. As the days passed, Maya began noticing subtle shifts in the way people treated each other. Conversations about diversity and inclusion became more common, not just among students but also among teachers. Mr. Carter organized workshops where students and faculty discussed ways to create a more welcoming environment. Even Principal Thompson held meetings with parents to address concerns and emphasize the importance of mutual respect. Amidst all this, Maya received a surprising invitation, a private meeting with Mrs. Dawson. It was arranged by Mr. Carter, who explained that the teacher wanted to speak with her directly. Though hesitant, Maya agreed, knowing it might be an opportunity for closure. When she entered the conference room, Mrs. Dawson was already seated at the table, her hands clasped tightly. In front of her, she looked smaller somehow, less intimidating than Maya remembered. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Mrs. Dawson cleared her throat. I want to apologize, she began, her voice trembling slightly. What I did was wrong. I let my biases cloud my judgment and I hurt you in the process. That's not who I want to be. Maya stared at her, unsure how to respond. Part of her wanted to lash out, to tell Mrs. Dawson exactly how much pain she'd caused. But another part of her saw the sincerity in the teacher's eyes and realized that forgiveness might be the next step toward healing. Thank you for saying that, Maya said slowly. But words aren't enough. You need to show people you've changed. Mrs. Dawson nodded earnestly. I will. Starting today. When the meeting ended, Maya stepped out into the hallway feeling lighter than she had in weeks. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, for Mrs. Dawson or for herself. But she also knew that real change often started with difficult conversations. Later that evening, as she sat in her room reflecting on the day's events, Maya realized something important. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for every student who deserved to feel seen, heard, and valued. And for the first time, she believed that change was possible. This part highlights Maya's continued growth as she navigates challenges and confronts those who oppose her actions. It also introduces a pivotal moment of reconciliation with Mrs. Dawson, setting the stage for resolution in the final chapter. Months passed, and St. Catherine's Academy began to transform in ways Maya never imagined possible. The conversations sparked by her courage had taken root, blossoming into meaningful changes throughout the school. Teachers attended mandatory training sessions on cultural sensitivity. Students formed a diversity club to celebrate differences, and posters promoting inclusivity adorned the hallways. While not everything changed overnight, there was a noticeable shift in the atmosphere, one of greater understanding and acceptance. For Maya, life at school became easier, though not without its challenges. Some students still whispered behind her back, and she occasionally felt the weight of being labeled the girl who spoke up. But with Ethan and Sophie by her side, along with newfound allies like Ms. Patel, she no longer felt alone. Her confidence grew as she embraced her role as a quiet leader, inspiring others simply by staying true to herself. Mrs. Dawson returned to teaching after completing her suspension and additional training. Though many students remained wary of her, she made genuine efforts to rebuild trust. She started each class with a brief reflection on kindness or empathy, encouraged open discussions about difficult topics, and took care to treat every student fairly. While some doubted whether her transformation was sincere, Maya chose to give her the benefit of the doubt. After all, everyone deserved a second chance, if they were willing to earn it. One crisp spring morning, Maya was called to the auditorium for another assembly. This time, instead of dread, she felt curiosity as she took her seat among her classmates. Principal Thompson stood at the podium, smiling warmly as he addressed the crowd. Today marks an important milestone for our school, he began. Over the past few months, we've worked together to create a more inclusive community. a place where everyone feels welcome and valued. None of this would have been possible without someone brave enough to speak up. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room before landing on Maya. Maya Thompson has shown us what it means to stand up for what's right even when it's hard. Her courage has inspired all of us to do better, to be better. So today, I'd like to present her with the inaugural Courage Award, a recognition of her strength and leadership. The room erupted into applause as Maya walked onto the stage, her heart pounding. She accepted the small trophy with trembling hands, overwhelmed by the support surrounding her. As she looked out at the sea of faces, some familiar, others new, she realized how far she'd come since that first nerve-wracking day at St. Catherine's. In her speech, Maya spoke from the heart. "I didn't do this alone," she said softly, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Change happens when people come together and decide to make things better. If my story teaches you anything, I hope it's that your voice matters, and that standing up for yourself can help others find their voices too." When the assembly ended, Maya stepped off the stage to cheers and hugs from friends and classmates alike. Even Jessica approached her afterward, offering a hesitant apology. "You were right," she admitted. "Things needed to change, and thanks for having the guts to start it." As Maya left the auditorium, she couldn't help but smile. She knew the journey wasn't over. There would always be obstacles to overcome, but she faced them now with resilience and hope. For the first time, she truly felt like she belonged. That evening, sitting at home with her father, Maya reflected on everything that had happened. "You know, Dad," she said thoughtfully, "I used to think I wasn't strong enough to handle all of this, but now I realize maybe I am." Her father smiled proudly. "You've always been strong, Maya. Sometimes it just takes a little courage to see it." And with that, Maya closed her notebook, ready to write the next chapter of her life. Not as the girl who stood up to injustice, but as the person she'd become because of it. This final part ties up the story, showing Maya's growth, the positive impact of her actions and her personal triumph. It leaves readers with a sense of hope and inspiration, reinforcing the message that one voice can spark meaningful change.